Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. We are live on a Sunday afternoon, and I can't wait to get started with this particular show. I am going to enjoy that. Hey, I'm back on the screen here. I wasn't at first, but welcome to Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. We're here every Sunday at 7 p.m., and we're live on Facebook, Spotify. But my one of my co-hosts is joining us. Okay, there we go. How are you? Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Good to see you. Hadn't seen you in a month.
I know.
Yeah. Yes, good to see you back.
You
I, I either
started.
I either have one or the other. I can't have you both at the same time. It just not working out. I'm just kidding. Valerie Steen is our other co-host. She's working for the emergency system for the veterans, and so she's out on duty today. They're calling to work. But today we have a special guest, a financial expert, Kimberly Y. What's the Y for? Yvonne? Yvette?
It is.
Yeah,
Yvonne, you had it right the
Yvonne
first time.
Williams, Yvonne of Legacy Ram CEO Group. And we're going to learn today how to build wealth, wealth building secrets, the secrets of wealth, the wealthy don't want us to know about. So we're going to learn about how to build wealth, how this in general. We're going to have a great time tonight. I am so eager to have you here, Kim, to share with us of your life, your journey, and how you learned, how you started in this business. Because we need to have wealth. We need to have be educated on wealth, how to grow wealth, how to have family wealth. And again, Kimberly Williams is our guest tonight, and here she is.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Mr. Tony. We've been trying to get together and get on here for a while. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I am a single mom. I have 4 daughters. I started homeschooling my children in 2014. So I have one that graduated from college this year. I have another one that's in Baltimore. She is a sophomore going into her junior year of college. And then I have twin girls that are seniors in high school. So I'm almost to the end. So I've been homeschooling them all. The twins I've been homeschooling since they were like first grade, middle of first grade. It wasn't really a choice that I wanted to homeschool. It was kind of like one of those things that God says, do this. And I didn't really want to do it. And he backed me into a corner. So I didn't really have a choice. They were all competitive gymnasts. So you get to the point where they're high level, they have to miss school, and it was hard to get an excuse from school. So that's how I ended up homeschooling. But the reason why I'm here today, I'm going to talk to you about how I came into this industry and how my life roles played into it. So I've been in the industry, licensed financial professional since 2015. 2015 is also the year that I went through a divorce. So imagine my kids are competitive gymnasts, started homeschooling them in 2014. Then I ended up divorced 2015. So at the time, my oldest daughter was just before she turned 15. So long story short, I've always been more of a saver and a planner. My ex-spouse was very much a spender and the complete opposite. So when I got a divorce, there were a couple of things that were a big concern. Number one is I had to replace a 6-figure income quickly because that 6 figures that was out of my household immediately. So anyone that's out there that may have gone through a divorce, you know what I'm talking about. When the household splits, the household income also splits. But I still have these 4 children that I have to put through college. Of course, 15-year-old, no money saved for college because I was a at-home wife, at-home mom. So we depended solely on my ex-husband's income. So the moment that I was divorced, I made up my mind. I wasn't willing to give up anything that I had my children in. I wasn't going to give up homeschooling. I wasn't going to give up gymnastics. And gymnastics is a very expensive sport. At the time, my grandmother was still living. I was taking care of her as well. So I wasn't willing to sacrifice anything. So it was, how am I going to start a career and replace the 6-figure income? That was issue number 1 that I was on the search for. Issue number 2 was, now if something happens to me, it's solely dependent on my planning what's going to happen to my children. Are they going to be okay? Are they going to be able to go to college? I don't want them to be a burden on anyone. So it made me think about, do I have things in order if something were to happen to me? So at the time, I had insurance coverage, 250,000, and I thought I was doing great. 250,000 seems like a lot, right?
Right.
Seems like that's plenty to bury me if something happens. And I'm thinking, split it, what's left between my 4 kids, and they should be okay. That's what I was taught. You get what you can afford, plus some if you can get extra. That's the only knowledge that I had about life insurance. Okay. So another thing about me is I'm born and raised Beaumont, Texas. I went to a private school. I went to All Saints. I am 45. So you can think about the time frame that I was at All Saints. Wasn't a lot of people that looked like me there. I was actually the only one of color in my whole class. And I think maybe there was 3 or 4 of us at any time in the school. Now you see more of us there, which is great. But long story short, those kids that I went to school with, their parents were doctors, lawyers, surgeons, things like that, high income earners. My mom was a social worker. So that's a totally different background, totally different income status. But I hung out with them a lot. They invited me on family trips, family dinners. So you hear things and you notice things. You notice differences between their lifestyle and how their households are run and the household that I came from. So I've always known that it's something that wealthier people know that the rest of us didn't know. So as I got older, always been aware of saving, but from the outside looking in, you think, hey, it must be investments, right? They must be investing because you hear a lot of talk about investment. So growing up, going through college, picking their career, things like that, you think you must have to have some type of money to invest. And that must be where they're getting their money from. How when a car is wrecked or goes out or has some kind of repair, they just go and buy another car cash. So I've always been observant of those types of things. So fast forward, I've gone through college before I got married. I was really good about saving, managing my money, but I also noticed that whenever something unexpected occurred, I'm dipping into my savings and then I have to replenish my savings. So I knew that there was some missing piece to the puzzle, right? So when I got my divorce, I decided, okay, I need to figure this out. I need to make sure that my finances are done. You know, I really probably need a financial advisor, but to sit down with your average financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, Edward Jones, places like that, most of the time you have to have a lot of liquid assets, which I did not have, even to get an appointment. Then you go to this appointment and they charge you, you know, anywhere from 500 or more to sit down with them for an hour. Then you decide where you're going to put your assets. That wasn't the position that I was in, but I still needed financial guidance. So I went to a seminar, ran into a friend of mine that said, hey, I'm doing things in the financial industry and I would like the opportunity to share with you what I do. I'm educating people on financial concepts. And I said, you know what? That is perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Timing was perfect. So I sat down to do something called a financial needs analysis. A simple way to put a financial needs analysis, you know, we all go to the doctor and do our physical checkups each year. Well, we should be doing financial checkups each year as well. So just like we stay on top of our physical health, we should be staying on top of our financial health as well. Looking at where we are now versus where we want to be and make sure that we're on track, right? So I took the appointment and we sat down and she goes over these concepts with me. And when you do your financial needs analysis, you're picking apart what you have in place. So everything goes into your financial planning. You have to look at all the pieces of your puzzle. Okay, so the first thing that I learned is When it comes to building wealth, wealthy people are not putting their money in investments. That is not where their money is coming from. They think about protection a lot different than we do. They understand that for their family to be financially stable or financially secure, they have to protect their economic value to their family. That's component number one. And when you think about it, we insure everything to its full economic value that we own. We insure our cars, our homes, even our cell phones to their full value. We're not going to spend $1,000 on a cell phone and only insure it for $100. So why is it that we underinsure ourselves? Which is why a lot of families, you hear people that say, oh, I have insurance, then something happens to a breadwinner and they're downsizing, or they're creating GoFundMe accounts, or selling dinners or t-shirts and things like that, trying to help the family sustain when something happens to a breadwinner unexpectedly. The reason why that happens is because we insure ourselves, but not to our full economic value. So we're going to talk about how you calculate out your full economic value in a moment. But I want to backtrack and go back to how the wealthy look at protection versus how we're taught to look at protection. So remember I said when I sat down to do my financial needs analysis, I had $250,000 in insurance coverage on myself. So if something happened to me, I thought that my family would be okay. We are taught really to look at insurance kind of like a bill or an extra expense. So usually we make an income, we pay our bills out of our income, do our discretionary things, and then whatever we have left over, that's what we put towards, protection. Usually when you sit down with your average insurance sales agent, they'll ask you, what is your budget, bring you a quote, and then offer you coverage. Wealthy people see protection in a different way. They properly protect themselves no matter what that cost is first, and they live off of whatever is left over. So that is the one big, huge difference. They understand that protection is the financial foundation to their financial future. Their future, as well as should something happen to them, their family is protected as well. Life goes on as usual because that insurance purpose is to replace their economic value to their family. So their family can remain in their houses, keep their cars, pay all of the bills, just as if they were still there. They understand that. So the way that we are supposed to calculate out our economic value is with something called the dime method. So that's D-I-M-E. The D, that represents your debt. The I represents your income. M represents your mortgage or rent if you're renting. And the E represents education. Okay, so when you're thinking about debt, you're thinking about things like credit card bills, car payments, any kind of personal loans, student loans, medical bills, things like that to go into your debt category. Because you know that if you're married, something happens to your spouse, you're equally responsible for that debt. The debt doesn't go away. And in a lot of cases, when something happens to a breadwinner, they come after the other people in the household for that debt. So you don't want to put a burden on your family or your spouse. So that's why debt is important. Income. You take your annual income and you should multiply that by 10 to get your number for your I in dime. Why 10 years? Because studies show that when something happens to a spouse or a head of household or income earner in the family, it usually takes about 10 years for that family to adjust to that person's income not being there. That's why we go with 10. So think about it like myself. I was a stay-at-home mom, wife, so I wasn't really working, but if something were to happen to my spouse, then now I have to get a job, start a career. So maybe I have to go to school for something or get recertified for something. Those things don't happen overnight. So that's why you want to allow 10-year income replacement for yourself if something happens to you, so your family will be okay. Your M, that's your mortgage. So you want to think about what is your balance on your mortgage if you own a home, or if you don't own a home and you're renting, you would take your rent, multiply that by 12, and then multiply that by 10 to, again, give a 10-year window. But most of the time, if you have a mortgage, you just want to account for the balance owed on your home. Because if something happens to you, you would still want your family to be able to stay in that home. So you want to cover that full balance. And then your E, that stands for education. So for education, most of us, if something unforeseen happens to us, we still want our children to go to college, which was something that was very important to me. So for education, what you want to do is think about how many kids you have. So for me, it was 4 at the time. We allowed a lot, 60,000 for each child, because they should be able to go to a pretty decent public college. Now with inflation, of course, things are more expensive, but that's still enough to get them through the majority that they would need. So 60,000 minimum for each child. So remember I said I had 250,000 in coverage? Well, if you take my E, I had 4 children, my oldest was 15, multiply that by 60,000, that's already 240,000 in coverage that I would need. So long story short, I found out that I was severely underinsured, which really upset me because I really thought that I was doing a good thing. I was in a good position, but when it was broken down that way and it made perfect sense, what is my economic value to my children? If something happens to me, no, we can't replace my physical value, but the whole purpose of protection or insurance is to replace my economic value to my family. So as much as I tried to plan and do the right thing, had I not sat down and did that financial needs analysis and something to happen to me, my children would have experienced financial devastation. They may not have been able to go to college. They would have been a burden on my family or whoever I left them with, which was the complete opposite of what I wanted. So how did that happen? Just lack of understanding the correlation between proper protection and having a stable financial household. So I was so moved by the information and concepts that I was taught. And of course, there's more that we're going to talk about and more that we discussed and that I learned in that session. But by the end of it, I said, hey, how can I do what you do? Because this is information that everyone needs. It's not anything that we're taught in school. It's not anything that we're taught in college, but it's something that the wealthy has been doing and understanding for a very long time. Yes, there were books, but they were books that I had never heard of. And you know, they say if you want to keep something a secret, put it in a book. So a lot of the books that it was recommended for me to read were very short, simple, and easy to understand. But had I not sat down with a financial consultant, educator, retirement specialist, whatever you want to call us, a licensed financial professional, those concepts would not have been introduced to me. So that is my background on how I ended up being a licensed financial professional in the financial industry. Is I actually started off as a client like everyone else. So that's a little bit about my background and how I came to do this. Again, I've been licensed since 2015, so I'm 9 years into it. So it did 2 things by me coming into this industry. Some know, some don't know. There's a lot of money to be made in the financial industry. There's so many people that can't afford or don't have the liquid assets to get a financial advisor. But sitting down with a licensed financial professional like myself, it doesn't cost you anything to sit down and do your financial needs analysis. It is completely complimentary. And it's more about education, because what I tell people all day, I'm not a salesperson. I can't sell you on anything, but I can educate you on important things that you need to know, because once people understand financial concepts and how it applies to them and how their picture looks, they'll ask you for what they need. You don't have to sell them on anything. So that is how I started in this industry, and I've made very good money. I did replace that six-figure income. I was able to keep my kids and everything. I have them in a lot of things. So we had scholarships as well. So that helped me out with the 15-year-old. But I've managed to make it happen. And it was all because of one session, me sitting down, looking for answers. I received the answers and a whole lot more. Okay, so that's a little bit about myself and my background. So now we're going to get into the more fun things. Did you have anything that you wanted me to add, Mr. Tony? I can't see you, but I think you
Now you can. I think Gina does.
I left out that you wanted me to share, or Gina, is there anything
I'm gonna hold my
you want to?
questions.
Okay.
I'm gonna hold my questions to the end because I feel like you're gonna answer them anyway.
Okay, so
All right.
that's just, I wanted to give you kind of like a highlight, but I wanted you to know that I was sitting down as a client. That's how I was introduced into financial industry, period, from a client standpoint and from a business standpoint as well. Because I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. Just so you know, when I was an at-home mom, I was always bringing in income because I always knew I needed to work for myself because I wasn't willing. I'm a very hands-on parent. And up until last year, I took care of my grandmother as well. And I wasn't willing to give that up either. So I knew that I couldn't work for anyone else. When you work for someone else, they own your time. You can't be off when you want to be off. It's kind of confining. So I had a cake pop business and dance choreography business, and I was a Zumba instructor and all of those things. So I was always figuring out creative ways to bring income in. So I wasn't always completely dependent on the ex-spouse. I always had my own money coming in. But like with everything, cake pops, cupcakes, treats, amazing business, huge profit margin. But when do people want those things? On the weekends and on the holidays. And when you have competitive gymnasts, you are traveling on the weekends and you are doing double duty with practices during the holidays. So that's what happened kind of with that business. The demand was higher than I could really afford to supply. So anyway, let's get back to this dime. So I broke down the dime method for you. But let's also go back to like your financial foundation. So the wealthy fully understand that protection is first, above all else. They insure their children when they are 14 days old before any health issues, birth defects, or anything like that really shows up. Most of the time, if a child has some type of disability, it'll show up, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months at one of those checkups. But they understand that it's so important to be properly protected. They don't put it off. 14 days old, they're getting those kids insured. A lot of people don't even know that you can insure a child that young. Yes, it is 14 days old. That's the earliest you can.
I didn't know that. It had a certain age to insure your kid. So 14 days in
14 days. Yep.
14 days old, you can insure your child.
14 days old, right? Because I've sat with a lot of clients and they say, well, I tried to get coverage on my child and they said that I couldn't do it because, they have this health defect or bad asthma or this or that or the other. But my friend, her child has a disability and she has insurance coverage. It's because she probably sat with someone that told her, hey, get this done right away. You never know what's going to happen. And she got her kid insured early before that condition showed up. Because remember, when it comes to insurance protection, it's about what your health is at the time that you apply for it. That's what it's based on, not what's going to happen in the future. So that's really, really important. But they understand protection first. So then after protection, then you're looking at, your debt management, emergency fund, and last is investments. So from the outside looking in, I know most of us, I know I did, I thought it was investments first. And then whatever I make from my investments, I put some to the side for my emergency fund. And that's how I pay off my debt. And then protection really was just kind of like just something I was taught to have. No, just enough to bury you. And like I said, if you have something extra, good, get something extra. Also, big difference between what we're taught in our mindset, most of us, and the wealthy is, again, we run into a financial rut. Usually the first thing that people let go is what? Their protection, their insurance. That's the first thing they let go before they let go of anything else. Wealthy people will downsize their house, sell a car, get rid of their cable. They do whatever they need to do to hold on to that protection. They will downsize before they get rid of it because they understand just how important it is. The other thing is most of us grew up thinking that life insurance is what? Death insurance. I know I hear people say that a lot. That is death insurance. It's not going to go to me. I won't see that money. That's just for me to pass down to my family. Well, that's because you're not exposed to all your types of insurance and you're not knowledgeable on it. So most people that I sit with know two types of insurance. They know term and they know whole life, right?
Right.
So a lot of people I sit with, they go with term because I know there's a company out there that pushes buy term and invest the rest. But if you pay attention and you listen to people like Warren Buffett and things like that, they say they're not against you investing. It's where you invest in your different types of strategies. So we're going to talk about that as well, because that's another big deal is investing is okay, but are you investing the right way? Okay. So most people know term and whole life, but the reality is there's two types of insurance. There's temporary and there's permanent. So under temporary, yes, there's term, which is for a certain length of time. You can do 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25. The good thing about term is it's really, really inexpensive. So am I against term? Absolutely not. When you calculate out someone's dime, like myself, I'll be honest, I needed 1 million in coverage to have proper protection, but I couldn't afford $1 million like permanent policy. So I had to start off with term. So I ended up with $1 million term because that's what I could afford at the time. But you don't want to think about term as your long-term piece of your puzzle for your financial planning or your financial future. Sometimes, just like with purchasing a house, sometimes you can't afford a house right off the bat. So you have to rent until you can save and afford to buy. Same thing with term. You should think about it that way. It's renting the right amount of coverage until you can afford something permanent. That is how you always want to think about term. Why don't you want to use term for a long-term goal? I can tell you this, that less than 15% of term policies ever pay out. Why? Because most people outlive the term that they have the coverage for. So they get to the end of the term. When they put that term in place, they were probably young and healthy. So when it comes to any type of life insurance coverage, it's based on your age. It's also based on your health, right? And we all know that there are certain health conditions that make a person uninsurable. So let's say you decide I'm going to get term as my permanent fix for my financial future, for my foundation to cover that protection part that the wealthy focus on. Let's say that you get a term, you're young and healthy. But let's say throughout that term, even if you get a 30-year. So let's say you get a 30-year and you're in your 30s. People retire at what age? Around 60, 65. Most average age is 65. So if you get a 30-year term in your 30s, 9 times out of 10, that term is going to run out right when you get to retirement and right when you're older and your health may start to change if you keep a pretty healthy lifestyle, right? So young and healthy when you got it, now you're in your 60s, 65 maybe, that insurance is going to be a lot higher. And what if your health has changed? What if you've had a stroke or a heart attack or developed some type of cancer? You might not be insurable, right? So now you're stuck with no coverage because your term has ended. That's the main issue with term, is it usually runs out right at the time that people need it the most. And a lot of times they will offer you, hey, I'll let you renew your term, but it's not going to be for another 30 years. Usually they'll do 10 years or max you out at 20 years, but the cost will triple or quadruple a lot of the times. I'll tell you a little story about a client that one of my business partners had. Sat down, did his financial needs analysis. He decided to stick with his term, but he put something permanent in place on his kids and his wife. When he put his coverage in place, he had been having it for about 10 years, so he got it around his 30s. It was for $2 million, and it was about $150 in coverage cost. That was his monthly premium. Right when he got around age 45-ish, I take that back, he had a 20-year term. So yes, he was around 45, 46-ish, had a massive heart attack. Massive heart attacks is an uninsurable condition. So he has this heart attack about 3-4 years before his term came to an end. Okay, so he had this heart attack, he pulls through, but then 3-4 years later, his term comes to an end. So now he's not really insurable, but the company that he's with is like, hey, we'll give you coverage for another 10 years, but your premium is not going to be $150, it's going to be $900 a month. So his premium went from $150 to $900, and it was only for 10 more years. So in 10 years, it was probably going to go up again because, of course, he's older and at a higher risk because now you have this heart attack in your medical background. So you're at high risk. So those are the things you have to concern yourself with term, is that usually those terms run out right when you need it the most, and the cost ends up going up really high to where people can't always afford it, especially if they're in retirement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, but there's good ways to use term as well. Like I said, if you need a lot of coverage and you can't afford it, term is the way to go, but you want to make adjustments in your finances to turn that or convert it into something permanent. So your second type of temporary, remember I said there's two. There's term and then there's employer sponsored. So employer sponsored is the one that people often forget about. So employer sponsored insurance, if you work for a chemical plant or the school district or most W-2 jobs, they will offer you insurance coverage, life insurance, but it's group insurance. So when you leave that job, retire, get laid off, any of those things, that insurance coverage stays. It doesn't come with you. So I know a lot of times they'll offer, well, hey, if you pay extra, we'll give you 3 times your salary or 4 times your salary in coverage. A lot of people do that, and they think because they're paying a little bit extra out of their paycheck for it, that it's theirs and they get to keep it. No, it's still just group insurance. It doesn't go with you when you leave. So I've sat with people, they get close to retirement and want to make sure they have all their T's crossed and their I's dotted, and they have no insurance outside of their job. And they say, hey, well, I have $250,000 in coverage with my job right now. I had one client that worked for the railroad. Well, when you retire, that coverage drops down to $10,000, just like your lower coverage final expense type of thing. So then we had to hustle. Luckily, he was healthy and could still get insurance. It was just a lot more than what it would have been if he would have put it in at the beginning of his career. So we were able to get him covered, but not for as inexpensive as we would have liked. But luckily, he was pretty healthy. But everyone's not so lucky. Some people develop health issues, and then they get to the end of their career thinking, I get to keep this insurance when I leave, and you don't. And then they end up in it not having any kind of insurance coverage, which is why we see an increase in GoFundMe accounts. Because what can they do? You can't work forever. Your body won't let you do that. But sometimes they can't qualify for insurance. And they retire and it stays with their employer. So that's your second type of temporary. Any questions for me so far? And I've been talking for a while.
No, you didn't.
Before we go into the permanent? Okay, you guys tell me if I'm not being clear, if I'm going too fast. Okay, so we understand temporary, two types, term and employer sponsored.
Right.
So when you get to your permanent coverage, there's whole life, there's variable life, there's universal life, and there's index universal life. So
Right.
those are your four types of permanent coverage. So let's talk about whole life. Whole life is the one that I would say that think of whole life kind of like your first generation cell phone, like your flip phone, not the smartphone. Think of it kind of like that. But whole life is usually the policies that our grandparents put in place for us or they had on themselves and things like that. And what was appealing about whole life was that you could borrow from it. That's why a lot of people like to get whole life.
Right.
And you earn a little bit of interest rate of return on your paid premium, but it's usually around 1% to 2%. So it's not a lot. But that's where the whole death insurance concept comes from, is with term and whole life. Because with whole life, what does that mean? You're paying that premium for your whole life. So you never really own that policy. So if you have it for 20, 30 years and you stop paying it, it's going to lapse and you won't have it anymore. So you pretty much pay that premium for your whole lifetime, right? So you really don't see that money. It's just to pass down to your kids. So that's where that mindset kind of comes from. So where a lot of people get roped into it, again, is the interest rate of return. And they're told that they can borrow from their death benefit if they run into a financial issue, something unexpected. That is something that they're able to do. So what happens? They get this policy. Let's say it's for $250,000. If you think about what you're paying for a whole life policy, let's think about our grandparents. I know my grandmother had a policy on me when I was young, probably like a toddler. If I kept that policy, then all the way through, the average age that people are living to now is like age 85 with medical advances and technology. Think about how much premium would be paid on that policy if she had $100,000 on me, from me being a baby all the way until I pass away. I'm sure more than $100,000 is being paid to that insurance company, but my family would only get that $100,000. Does that make sense? So a lot of times you end up paying more than the policy is worth when you're paying on that policy for a lifetime. That's issue number one. Issue number two, let's say I have to take a loan for an unexpected house repaired or replace my roof or something like that. And I say, hey, I want to borrow for my $250,000 death benefit. Insurance company will say, okay, they're going to run your credit. So they'll give you the loan, but you have to pay that back plus interest. And the interest is usually 6% or more, depending on your credit. Okay, so if you have a good credit score, you're looking at 6%. You don't have such a good credit score, you're looking at more than that, right? So let's think about this. If you're only earning 1% to 2% interest rate of return on the premium that you're paying in, but you take out a loan and you have to pay back the loan plus 6%, what are you doing? You're digging yourself into a hole, right?
Right.
Because you're not earning as much as you're going to have to pay back. Okay, so we had that. That's the second issue. So what happens is the person has to pay back their loan payment plus the premium on their insurance to keep their insurance coverage going. So usually what will happen, they run into the issue of not being able to maintain both of those payments. So they stop making the payment. So then the insurance guys come in and knock on your door or calling you and saying, hey, you haven't paid your insurance. Your coverage is about to lapse. What's going on? So you say, hey, I can't pay my premium plus this loan payment. And they say, don't worry about it. Just make sure you maintain your premium to keep your policy open. Don't worry about the loan. We can take the loan balance from your $250,000 death benefit when you pass away. So you don't have to worry about paying that back. Just keep your coverage going. So what they don't tell you is that not only are they going to deduct the loan amount, but that interest is steadily being incurred every time you're not making those payments on that loan balance. So it eats up the death benefit. So, Mr. Tony, have you ever heard of any situations, I know I have, where the family knows that the family member had insurance coverage, but they go to cash in the insurance policy and they're told, hey, this policy is only worth $5,000 or $2,000. And they say, well, the policy says the face amount is $250,000 or $100,000. How are you saying that we're only entitled to get $5,000? They say, well, they took out this loan, never paid it back. So the loan plus the interest incurred over this many years comes out to this amount, and this is all that's left. So then they're having to do a GoFundMe account to bury their family member. Have you heard of any of those kinds of situations, Mr. Tony, where someone thought their family member had coverage, they know they were paying it every month, cash it in, and it's not worth much?
Many times, over and over.
And that's why. So that's what happens with whole life, and that's what gives like this negative connotation on insurance and why people think of it as death policies or scam or things like that. But that's just one type of insurance. So whole life, that's where that stigma comes from. So the main two issues with whole life is you don't earn that much on your interest rate of return on what you're paying in, and you never own that policy. You're paying your premium for your entire life. And that death benefit is just set at whatever it is, no matter how much you pay into it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So your second type is variable life. Variable life is risky. It's based on the market. So you could end up on the higher end if the market's doing well. You could end up on the low end as far as your death benefit if the market isn't doing so well. So if we could predict when we're going to pass away and that the market is going to be up at the time, there wouldn't be much of an issue with variable life, but we can't predict that. We don't know when we're going to go, and we don't know what the market is going to be doing. So I have a lot of people or clients that will ask me, well, why would anyone get variable life? And it comes down to how it's taxed. Any type of cash value life insurance falls under tax code 7702, which keeps it tax advantage, meaning the money that you pull from that, it's tax-free when you take it out. So you don't get taxed on money that you receive as a insurance payout. Do you know that?
This is on the variable, right?
This is on any cash value life insurance. So if something happens and you have a term and your family gets that money, they don't pay taxes on that money. So if it's $300,000, they get the full $300,000 completely tax-free. Cash value life insurance is not taxable.
Okay.
So that's why for people that want to invest and play in the market, sometimes they'll do it through a variable life policy to keep that money earned tax-free. Does that make sense?
Correct.
So that's really for people that want to play in the market. They're not really using that as a long-term fix to protect their family. It's about, I get a chance to grow my money and pull it out completely tax-free. So that's the plus with variable life. Universal life, it was very popular, or is popular with a lot of entrepreneurs, because the death benefit is flexible, which makes the premium flexible. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I'm a real estate agent and my business is doing really, really well. So I get $500,000 in coverage. Okay. And let's say that something happens and my income declines and I can't afford $500,000 in coverage anymore. I'm actually able to lower my premium and lower my coverage from $500,000 to maybe $250,000 to make it more affordable. Also, you could do it the opposite way. Start off at $250,000. Maybe your business isn't established yet. And let's say you have a big surge or growth in your business and you need more coverage because you're making more income. So your dime is higher. So I need to increase that coverage to $1 million. It could be increased to $1 million, and then of course my premium would increase as well. So it's flexible, meaning that death benefit is not just a set amount like it is on a whole life policy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. The other good thing about universal life is your interest rate of return that you earn on those premium, it's a little bit higher than whole life. It's usually between 3 to 5%. Now, with the economy doing what it's been doing for a while, it's hard to find the 5%, but usually it falls somewhere between 3 and 5%. So it's just kind of a guaranteed minimum interest rate of return on that, somewhere between 3 to 5%, depending on the company. So at least you're earning, a set amount on that, and that, you're getting a good interest rate of return on the money that you're paying into it. And it's flexible, so if your income changes, you don't have to jeopardize your coverage. You can adjust it. That's universal life. Then came along index universal life, which is your IUL. So with your IUL, just like the universal life policy, it has a flexible death benefit and flexible premium. So if you need to increase it, you can. If you need to decrease it, you can. But where the big difference is on the interest rate of return and how you earn that, it is based on the index. So let's talk about your index and what that means. So when you put your money anywhere, there's only 3 options or 3 ways to grow it, okay? One way is fixed. So your fixed would be kind of like your whole life or your universal life. That just means if they guarantee you an interest rate of return, it just grows at a steady pace. It doesn't go up, doesn't go down. No matter what happens, you're earning that amount. Variable is the one that's up and down and all over the place. That can be risky because it's based on the stock market or it's market driven. However the market performs, that's how your interest rate of return is determined. Index looks more like a staircase. So it has a floor of 0, but it mirrors the market without being investing in the market. So years ago, people were only focused on the S&P 500. And the S&P 500 has a cap. Now the cap is like 9%. So when the market is up, your money grows up to 9%. When it's down, you don't win or lose. It just stays level because it has a floor of 0. But what people don't know is now there's many different indexes that companies are using that don't have the cap on it. So long story short, when the market is up, your money grows. When the market is down, stay level. That's different from variable strategy because if anyone knows about market gains and losses, just to give you a simple example, let's say you have $100. Market goes down 50%. Now you're down to $50. Let's say the next month the market goes up 50%. A lot of people in their mind thinks, oh, the market went down 50%, but then it went back up 50%, so I'm back to my $100. But you're not. You're only at $75 because you lost $50 that first month, right? When the market went down 50%, it goes up 50%, you're only adding $25 to that. So you have 75. So what you have to remember about market gains to keep it simple is that when you take a loss, the market has to go up. If you take a 50% loss, it has to go up 100% for you to get back to that $100 that you started with. So long story short, when you take a loss, it takes double the money just to get you back to where you started. Does that make sense? Yes. So the index takes that loss part out of it because when the market goes down, you just stay where you were. So that's the big difference. It's a safe way to grow your money. And I want you, if you want, Warren Buffett talks about index strategies a lot. They say that middle class should be using the index. Why? Because you suffer the gains without having the risk of the losses. So the IUL uses the index strategy, not the market strategy. It's not market driven like variable. So it's a safe way to grow your money and get a pretty good interest rate of return. I can tell you on the index, well, on the IUL, with one of the companies, the average has been about 8.13% since 2013. And we know that there's been a lot of market losses in there, market drops, because the market has been very volatile, especially since COVID. And, whenever it's election year, crazy things happen as well. So you just need to be mindful and understand those things. But the IUL kind of gives you best of both worlds. But the other good thing about the IUL is that you're not paying that premium for your entire life. You pay it at one point. That policy, you own it. So if you are a certain age with a certain risk classification, you're pretty healthy. If you wanted to do a single pay, you could do a single pay and own that policy, and then just kind of use it like the wealthy use it to save. So we'll talk about that more in a moment, but let's see. Do you have any questions so far about the different types of insurance? Was I clear? Let's
Well, you're
pause
pretty
for
clear, but
questions.
maybe the audience might ask questions, make a comment. But
And
let's go
Gina,
forward.
if you have any questions so far.
Where is Gina?
Oh, she's
Yeah.
not there? I can't see either one of
Yeah.
you. So
Now you can. Yes. Now.
yes, now I
She
can
about
see you.
She about there. Maybe she stepped out a minute, but
Okay.
we'll go to your final.
Any
Okay,
questions in the chat that I can't see?
no, you've had one chat saying that's great information that you share.
Oh, thank
Rashad
you.
Robinson. Yes, we thank you, Rashad, for that. Okay.
So, those are your different types. So that's what you have to understand first and foremost, because I have a lot of people that come up to me and say, hey, don't you sell insurance? Can you put a policy in place for me? So my first question is, well, what kind of insurance do you need or you're looking for? And they'll tell me what they're looking for. I'll say, okay, how much coverage do you need? And the most common response is,
before you get started, that has a comment here from Mary Jo Sims. Said, what is the timeline of these growths?
Okay, so we're always looking at it annually. So with IULs and most insurance policies, they're going to give you annual statements. So it's from year to year. So it's your growth in an annual year. And we go back and we get our averages. Most companies look at how has the market done in the last 19 years or 20 years. So I went back as far as I've only tracked it since like 2013. Because I had looked at it a couple of years before I put mine in place in 2015. And it's been tracked, like the average has been about 8%. So where other people have taken losses, there's been some years where I stayed level because the market was down, but my average has been about 8.13. Does that answer your question, Mario? Hope that answers his question. If not, he can put a follow-up question and you'll see it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's step one. But what I really want people to understand, hopefully we have enough time and we might have to do a part two. Oh, yes, there's tax advantages on all cash value life insurance. So that's a valid question. I guess I'll bridge and talk about that. So there's three ways that money is taxed. There is basically three buckets. So you have your tax now category. Your tax now category, that's where your bank accounts, checkings accounts, savings accounts, mutual funds, CDs, things like that. Those all fall under your tax now category, meaning you're going to get taxed on that at the end of every year. Okay. Then you have your tax deferred group. Those are your pensions, your 401ks, your IRAs, most of your traditional annuities fall under tax deferred, meaning I'm not going to pay the taxes today. I'm going to put that off and I'll pay those taxes in retirement when I get ready to touch that money or when I'm past age 59 and a half. Then you have your other category, which is your tax advantage categories. That's where your Roths fall, your health savings accounts, your 529 college savings plans, and cash value life insurance. So all cash value life insurance is tax advantage, Mario. So that's the good thing about cash value life insurance, which is why the wealthy focus. Well, on which one of those buckets do the wealthy focus on? They focus on the tax advantage bucket. So that's why they put so much emphasis and importance on protection, because they know that any money that they save in there, any money that they grow in there, when they get ready to touch it, it is completely tax advantage, tax free. Zero is your hero. with the IUL. So hopefully that answers your question as well. And that is one of your biggest secrets right there. Wealthy people have been using IULs for a very, very long time. But if you think about it, Mr. Tony, do you hear people advertising on TV or the radio about you should get an IUL? What do
This is
you
all
hear
new to
them?
me. Yes.
What do you hear them push? They say, hey, you should get term policy. You should get term. My husband and I could get $500,000 and we're only paying $20 a month. You hear them pushing term. You don't hear them put, and remember, term, you're not earning any kind of cash value on that. It's just like rent. You're not earning any equity in it. So when you rent an apartment, you're just paying rent. You're not earning any equity back on it. That's the same thing for term. So you don't hear people talking about IULs. You don't hear it on the radio. You don't hear commercials about it. Why is that? Because the wealthy and the government don't want people putting their money in IULs or saving in IULs. They want you to put your money in a 401k or something like that that's tax deferred. So they can get a bigger chunk of your money at the end. So that is one of their biggest secrets, and that is where they save for their kids' college. That's where they have their long-term care lumped in, all of those things. So I think we have enough time to touch on this. What are the 3 threats that everyone faces in life, Mr. Tony? Number 1 is, what if I die too soon? So if you die too soon, you need to make sure that, you want your family to be taken care of.
Right.
Number 2, what if you don't die and you just become ill? Okay, that's what bankrupts most people in retirement is medical expenses.
Right.
And then lastly, what if I live too long? So what if I run out of money? How many people do we see, elderly people, working at Walmart as greeters or Sam's or doing crossing guard, things like that? They're not working because they want to. They're working because they've run out of their retirement money, or their pension is not enough to maintain their standard of living, or they have medical expenses that they can't cover. So IULs are literally policies to plan for life, not your death. And that's what that's what the wealthy understand. So they use IULs as life insurance coverage, as savings accounts, and their retirement plans.
Right.
Because why do I say they use it as a savings account? The money that they put in there, remember, they can grow it based on the index, right? So the money they dump in there and grow is completely tax-free, but it's not considered an asset. So let's say they're a business owner and they have money that they've been dumping in their IUL to save. So let's talk about this. When you put money in the bank, does that money grow by a lot? No. You earn what? Less than 1%.
That's correct.
Rule of 72, Albert Einstein concept says, if you take the number 72 divided by your interest rate of return, that's how many years it takes your money to double. So if they were putting their money in a bank, they're earning less than 1%, but let's say they get lucky and have it at a bank that gives them 1%. 72 divided by 1 is 72. That means it would take 72 years for their $100 to become $200.
Right.
How many 72 years do we have to live? 1 if we're lucky. So they're not putting their money in a bank. They are putting it in these IULs so that they're earning more than that 1% or what have you. So not only is it protected from taxes when they get ready to pull that money out, it's not considered an asset. So if they get sued, file for bankruptcy, get a divorce, any of those things, the money that they have, the cash value that they have in that policy that they've grown, it cannot be touched because it's not considered an asset. So have you seen businesses or business owners file bankruptcy and then a week or 2 later, they open up their business again under a different name?
Right. Happens all the time.
It happens a lot.
Right.
How does that happen? Because we know if you file bankruptcy,
you can't do anything.
You can be able to go to a bank and get a loan, right?
Right.
Oh, but you can, because you could use your insurance policy and the money that you have in your IUL as collateral. So, what bank is not going to give you a loan if you have collateral and they're guaranteed to get their money back? Most banks will give you the loan because they're guaranteed to get
The
their money
collateral.
back.
Right.
Right. So, they use these IULs like legal offshore accounts. They dump the amount of money that they can dump in there. There are stipulations, but unlike a Roth, there's no income uh, requirement or income maximum to qualify for an IUL. So I know a lot of people say, well, instead of getting an IUL, I was told that I should just get a Roth, right? So I have a lot of clients in California, single, they qualify for a Roth. Got married, no longer qualify for a Roth. So those that are looking at Roths, yes, you get the tax advantages, but remember, each year the IRS guidelines change. So like for 2024, the max that a single person could earn in their household is $161,000. Married couples, $240,000 household income. So do you really think that wealthy people are putting their money in Roths?
Seems like they're putting their money all in a IUL.
They are, because there's not that income limitation to be able to dump money in there. So that's the issue with the Roth. A Roth gives you the tax advantages, true. But what happens when you make too much money and you don't qualify for it anymore? They don't have to worry about that. So you're correct. They're putting their money in IULs because the money in there, they can use it as collateral for their businesses to reopen their businesses, but it's not considered an asset. So if they go through any kind of divorce, bankruptcy, or anything like that, that money is protected and cannot be touched. Also, a lot of your IULs these days have living benefits on them. So if you are diagnosed with a terminal illness, chronic illness, critical illness, you sustain a critical injury because you get into an accident or something like that. And now recently, one of the companies that I work with covers Alzheimer's. So if you're diagnosed with any of those conditions, now this insurance coverage that you have, you can actually access it while you're still living to cover expenses associated with those illnesses. The money comes to you, unlike long-term care where it goes directly to the facility or healthcare provider. That money comes to you and you can use it on anything: household expenses, groceries, vacation, home modifications, whatever you need. So they don't have to worry about the what if I become ill. So business owners, most business owners, that's their three things that they're most concerned about. Is my family going to be okay if I die too soon before my business is really stable? What if I become ill and I can't run my business or I can't work? Is my business going to survive? What if I live too long and I don't have like things in order on that front? So as far as retirement income, those are things that IULs kind of are the solution to all of those concerns. And that's exactly how the wealthy have been using those. Now, you need to sit down, number one, with someone to do your financial needs analysis to find out what is your economic value to your family. What is my dime? Where is my money? How is it being taxed? Do I have all of my money in tax deferred accounts? Do I have them all in tax now accounts? Do I have it diversified to where I have some in the tax advantage bucket? You need to be concerned about how your money is taxed now and how it's going to be taxed at retirement. You need to be concerned about what if I become ill? Am I going to have enough money to pay for those types of expenses? My grandmother, only so many hours were covered under home health with her Medicare coverage. The rest of that we had to pay out of pocket if we needed more hours for her. And that's very expensive. Usually it's like $30, $35 an hour to have a healthcare professional come in and take care of you or a loved one. And then the other thing is, I hear a lot of people say things, Mr. Tony, like, oh, well, I'm not worried about retirement. I'll probably have like $1 million in my 401k. What do we know about 401ks? They're tax deferred. What do taxes usually do over time, Mr. Tony? Do they stay the same, go down, go up?
And the terms?
Your taxes. What
No,
do
they
taxes usually do?
up or down. It fluctuates.
Right, but most of the time, what we've seen is they go up or they stay the same, right?
Right.
So let's say you have $1 million in your 401k, and let's say you get lucky and the tax rate is the same that it is today. Right off the top, 300,000 of that is going to go to Uncle Sam based on today's tax rate. So then you are left with 700,000, right?
Right.
Most people that accumulate $1 million in their 401ks are people that are at least making six figures a year, wouldn't you say?
Right.
So if your standard of living is based off of six figures, 100,000 a year, you have 700,000 that's your actual money after taxes at retirement. Let's say you retire at age 65. People are living until 85 or older. But let's say you at least live through 85. You need that 700,000 to last for 20 years. So if you take 700,000 and divide it by 20 on your calculator, what do you come out with? 35,000 a year. So if you're used to living a six-figure income, is 35,000 a year going to be enough?
Oh no.
To maintain your standard of living? Probably not. And then what is going to happen with the medical expenses? Like people pay a lot of money out of pocket for medications. Medicare doesn't cover that much. So how long is that going to last you? And then if you pull out more than that, you're just going to run out faster. So is $1 million in your 401k really going to last you? What if you live past 85? What are you going to do? You're out of money.
Very interesting information.
But in IUL, most of them have the option for a lifetime income option. But that's why it's important to sit and see where you are, what you need, what you would need to save. There's two numbers you need to be concerned about really, is what is my dime and then what is my retirement number? How much money do I need in retirement to maintain my standard of living? And what is my lifespan to make sure that I'm not going to run out of money? That is what people like myself help you figure out. So I know we're out of time and we went over by 5 minutes. I don't know if you want to do a part two. But
I would like to do. I like to do a part two because this is information that I have learned, and I've been in the finance and financial industry for so long, and this is. I never really knew much more about the insurance or portion of it, and I think this is some great information that you have shared with us and our audience. But I've got one comment coming from our YouTube channel, and
absolutely.
that's Yo again. He said, "What is the timeline that you must contribute to the UIL, not IUL, before you are eligible to receive loans from your UIL?"
So with your IUL, the earliest most of the time that you would want to touch it is in your first year, but it depends, Mario, on how much you're putting in. So IULs aren't just for insurance coverage. You want to be able to overfund it. So it depends on how it's designed. And I've sat with a lot of people, Mr. Tony, that have IULs, that sat with someone that didn't really do their financial needs analysis and design it to their needs. And I've had to replace it or redesign it for that purpose, meaning they gave them a high coverage and most of their money is going towards the cost of insurance instead of going towards the savings. So when you think of an IUL, since I tell people to think about it like a hybrid account, when you pay into it, you have your cost of insurance. So let's say my premium on the insurance portion is $100, but I want to put in $300 a month. That means out of that $300, $100 is going to go towards my cost of insurance, and the other $200 is going towards my savings side, my savings and investment side. Right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the more money that I overfund, the more it's going to grow and compound. When it comes time to pulling loans, he's at like really those living benefits, that's coming from your face amount of your policy. Let's say I get a policy and 6 months later, I'm diagnosed with some type of illness that qualifies me under my living benefits. I can access up to 90% of my base amount, if it's 250,000, up to 90% of that to go towards my living benefits if I choose to. Some people don't want to do that and they want to take money out as a loan. Long story short, it depends on how much you have accumulated cash value in there, but usually it's no sooner than a year. So after your first year, if you have an accumulated cash value, just like a savings account, you can always pull that money out that you put in, but they will usually give you the option to take it as a loan as well. So to answer your question, rule of thumb, usually after your first year, but if you haven't paid enough overfunded into it to where you have any kind of cash value, you may not have enough in there to be eligible to take it as a loan. So that's case by case. But rule of thumb, you're safe after the first year most of the time. But an IUL is not going to be a fit for everyone. That's why your financial needs analysis is so important. I did not start off in an IUL because I didn't have extra discretionary money to overfund it. So I started off with term and I rented until I made enough income to buy. Then I converted that IUL. I converted my term to an IUL is what I did. So that's something called a term conversion. That's what I did. But I knew from doing my financial needs analysis that where I was and where I wanted to be. And Mr. Tony, I downsized a lot of things. I cut down on cable, cut down on taking my kids to Starbucks. I started cooking more. I did what I needed to do to be able to afford that IUL because I knew what my retirement number was and I needed to be saving to make sure I was in a good place for retirement.
That is great. That is great. Great information you share with us this evening. And I really appreciate it. I think a lot of other people is agreeing with me as well that this is some information that we wasn't aware of. And I definitely want to talk to you about an IUL going forward. I'm sorry that Gina lost phone connection because we're in the middle of a storm here going on. But we're going to have a part 2 of this because we're going to want to learn more about the IUL and how it can say what we can do for long term. But I have a question I want to ask you. What's the initial? Is it initial payment into the IUL?
It's really no different than any kind of insurance, Mr. Tony. So you go through the same process. So first of all, like I was saying, you always want to do your financial needs analysis first, just to kind of see what your numbers are, because you want to know, okay, I want to use this for protection for my family. I also want to use it to plan for retirement. So we need to know what those numbers are. So then based on what those numbers are, hopefully you sit with someone like myself that is going to take the time to do that. And you want your IUL designed in a way to cover your needs. It's not cookie cutter. I'm not going to just put everyone in this type of design. It's case by case. So when we get those numbers right, we get the design right, and you say, okay, I'm good with this. This is what I want to do. Then we do your application, and it's going to ask your normal health questions. So I like to use companies that don't do blood and urine. Nobody wants to get poked or prodded or doing those things. I try to go with those types of companies. So we send in the application. It goes through underwriting. Then once you're approved, all they're going to do is draft that first amount that you agree to pay. So you're going to know what your cost of insurance is and how much you want to overfund. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
So if you decide I'm going to put $400 a month and I'm going to design, I do your design where you have your insurance coverage and your saving.
Right.
That's all that's going to draft out when you're approved is that one payment. And then you auto draft every month after that on whatever date you choose. So
we got to get together. Yes, we are going to get together. And I want those that know about Kim. Kim is a financial expert with Legacy CEO Group, the wealth building. She's sharing other wealth building secrets to the wealthy that the wealthy doesn't share with us. And we don't know anything about it. So if you see it by Kim ad here that says Kimberly Y. Williams, please get in touch with our phone number is 832-876-4993 and also 409-998-7677. Please contact Kim. Very great information, Kim. We shared it with us this evening, and I enjoy.
Mr. Tony, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you
Oh,
cut off
yeah.
for a second. Okay,
No,
well,
I was
don't
moving the
take my
screen
word
around.
for it, Mr. Tony, because remember I said this is not stuff that I'm making up, and I was just like you, just looking for answers. Read some books. There's some good books, some really short ones. So there's Money, Wealth, and Life Insurance is a good one that I like by Jake Thompson. Look at how short it is. It's a very easy read. And I'll leave you with this thought. I know some people that say, I don't want to mix my investments or my money in the bank with life insurance. But in this book, it talks about where banks put your money when you put it in the bank. So I ask a lot of my clients, do you want to put your money in a bank or do you want to put your money where the bank puts your money?
Right.
When you put money in the bank is putting your money in an IUL.
That's right.
They are getting the gains off of that money. That's why when someone steals the money out of your account, they replace it. No questions asked. Why? Because they have all this discretionary money because they're earning interest off of the money you're putting in there. Loans. How are they able to give out loans and not go bankrupt when people don't pay it back? Because they have a surplus of money. So this book talks about Walt Disney, all the banks, how much surplus money they have, how they're using life insurance, how the wealthy are using it as their personal bank, supercharge their savings, which we talked about, tax-free personal bank so they can pull money out and not have to worry about any tax repercussions. They're helping their kids buy cars, cash, put down payments on houses, all of these things, pay for college, all because they're putting that money there, which is not considered an asset or earned income. So there's that book. There's The Retirement Miracle by Patrick Kelly is another good one, where they talk about how you have a tax-free retirement, which I've already kind of shared with you guys that. And then this book talks about the index and same thing, The Power of Zero, how to keep your money tax-free and how to properly plan. And these are not long books, you guys. So don't take my word for it. Go read about it in some books. That's where my credibility is going to come from. So don't take it from me. Read too. So
thank you.
I'll leave you on that note.
Kimberly Williams, everyone, please get in touch with Kim. And that's expands our knowledge and not only our knowledge, but it's kind to give us a place to place our money to start putting them in the bank and let the bank use us up. And that's all the banks are doing. They're taking advantage of us, because we're not making money on the banks, on your money. So, Kim, it's been a great time. You've given us some great information, and I enjoyed you. Please stay on. I'm going to hang up here in a minute, and we're going to see you guys later on next Sunday. And we're going to come with a part 2 with Kim again, because this is some exciting. So those that missed it can get a taste of it the next time. So we're gonna close today, and we wish you all well, and God bless you. Thank you for watching and listening to Knowledge is Power Podcast Live.
Thank you for watching Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. Be sure to like and subscribe to all Knowledge is Power social media pages.